So this talk is a recording of the two-part presentation I gave at the new Living Expo on astrology. It's a two-part talk that I called the Yugas and Yogic Astrology. And I decided to record this and post this because it was a talk I gave for free, and I thought people would enjoy it, as people did at the new Living Expo outside San Francisco. And so I want to just dive right into this. Um, so the Yugas and Yogic Astrology. This is a two-part presentation. Um, the Yugas is the first portion, are a astrological time cycle that's equinoctial based, meaning based on the precession of the equinoxes, that comes from India and is a very ancient form of an astrological time cycle. It is very pertinent to our time because, in general, the yuga that we are in conveys tremendous information and energy and dynamics as to why the times are the way they are. The yugas are a astrological time cycle that's relevant to conveying the general consciousness and capabilities of man on Earth. Um, I will go into a lot more detail, but as we see a circle, it kind of conveys, just like as astrology does, that time is not linear, but more cyclical. And I will dive into this. Swami Sri Yukteswar, he is the authority that I am appealing to. Just to get that out there, he was the guru of Paramhansa Yogananda. Sri Yukteswar was a great spiritual master himself, as well as an astronomer and astrologer. He's the author of The Holy Science from the 1890s, which goes into these yuga cycles, and he kind of resurrected the equinoctial based yuga system from India. So the yugas. Yuga basically means ages in this context that we're using, but it also literally means to yoke, the joining of two things, because we're basically dealing with two sides of a cycle. One's an ascending side, one's a descending side. And so they're two sides coming together, yoking together. These ages, like I said, are relevant to the consciousness and capability of man mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically on Earth. They affect the general consciousness on Earth. Um, and it's an astrological time cycle. Time cycles in astrology are prevalent all over the place, even down to the lunar day, the lunar year, the solar year, the various monthly cycles in Indian astrology. You have the lunar month, the solar month, the Savana month, the Nakshatra month, these kinds of things. We have astrological time cycles, planetary periods, synodic cycles that are commonly used in Western astrology, eclipse cycles that are very complicated that are used in Western astrology. Um, it's just we have nighttime and daytime is an astronomical and astrological phenomenon. It's cyclical. And so the yugas are a astrological cycle system that conveys larger degrees of astrological impressions to Earth, relative to consciousness and capabilities of man on all levels. The four yuga cycles are Satya, Treta, Dwapara, and Kali, and they each have a corresponding ascending and descending cycle to them. They connect to the golden, silver, bronze, and iron ages of ancient Greece. And just the basic astronomy of the yugas, it has to do with, according to Sri Yukteswar, like I said, he's the authority here. When our solar system moves closer to the galactic center of our Milky Way galaxy, we receive more energetic and magnetic power from that source, and conveys itself as astrological phenomenon. we receive greater power from that source. When we are closer to the galactic center as a solar system, meaning Earth especially, we are in the higher ages. When we are furthest from that galactic center, we are in the lower ages because we are furthest from the source of power in our galaxy. Now, according to Sri Yukteswar, our Earth wobbles on its axis that creates this effect of the precessional cycle because our sun revolves around a dual star. It has a binary star. Now, this is not an accepted scientific fact. This is according to Sri Yukteswar. And he says, as we revolve around this dual star, we move closer to the galactic center, we receive power, astrologically speaking. Now, there's more and more research and evidence that many named stars have binary stars. Anywhere between 50 to 80% of known stars have a binary or dual star. It's increasing and it's not an unknown concept. So it's interesting in that regard. But this is according to Sri Yukteswar. And here's another diagram. We see the ascending on the left side. We see the descending on the right side. Satya Yuga is also known as the spiritual age. It's the golden age, trait to the mental age. Dwapara, which is the age we are in, is the energetic age. Kali Yuga is the dark age or the material age. We are in an ascending cycle of Dwapara Yuga in the beginning phase. We're about 12.5% up the ascending cycle, which is nothing. We're in a very low age. And I will go into details about that because it's relevant to why our world is the way it is in such a crazy time. But these astrological cycles also aren't an on and off switch. It's a very gradual ascending and descending phenomenon. Um, it's kind of like you can just take the day. We don't move automatically to midday or to midnight. There's a gradual cycle effect that happens as the sun re sheds its light on Earth in its cyclical kind of format with the daytime and nighttime. That's a microcosm of the macrocosm of the yugas. As we move into the higher ages, we receive more magnetic power and light from the galactic center. We're in the higher Treta and Satya yugas. And as we're furthest away from that, we're in the Dwapara and Kali yugas. So it's um, a cycle in this regard. And in between each yugas, there are what's called sandhis or transitionary phases. Just like during the day, we don't transition from daytime to nighttime. We have the dusk, we have the dawn. In astrological time cycles, there's transitionary phases. It's just kind of a bigger macrocosm in this regard. It's also called the great year, this equinoctial cycle, uh, as it's commonly called. So the Kali Yuga, this is the material or dark age. It's 1200 years in one cycle, whether ascending or descending, and it's 2400 years in total. It's the age of matter. It's the age of gross matter. It's the age of consciousness of man where man is least developed on Earth. It's just a time of every vibrational frequency being expressed through politics, through sciences of all kinds, through education, through intelligences of all kinds, through religion, is manifesting in its lowest form, basically. The health of man is in its lowest form. The lifespan of man is in its lowest form. As it's said in the Indian scriptures, the bull of Dharma is only on one leg, meaning the bull of Dharma, the bull of righteousness, the full bull, symbolically speaking of the capability of man, is only on one leg. In other words, the bull can't really stand straight. In other words, man's not really fully capable here. Doesn't mean greatness can't happen through religious means or through great people of various kinds, But in general, as the yugas do, as yugas represent, in general, the general consciousness is in a lower vibrational expression. In other words, here's an example. The great Roman Emperor Trajan, I should say, I don't know if I should even say great, but the Roman Emperor Trajan, uh, at the height of the Roman Empire would have about 10,000 slaves slaughtered for entertainment purposes. That's Kali Yuga consciousness, basically. Now we have in Dwapara Rising, we have football. We have big sporting events. That's basically a entertainment that's intense, but it's entertainment in that regard. Like I said, education, there's a lot of illiteracy in Kali Yuga. I will refer to a book at the end of this presentation, which gives very concrete and historical evidence to support this Yuga time cycle frame. And it's very compelling and very excellent. But this is just a beginning introductory talk onto the Yugas. And so it's a period of emphasizing gross matter. Dwapara Yuga. Each Yuga cycle increases in time, which is kind of nice because the higher ages are more prevalent of an experience on Earth compared to the Kali Yuga. Um, the Dwapara Yuga is known as the age of energy. It's the electric age. It's the age of um, the concept of space being annihilated. It's the age where in Kali Yuga, it's the age of just gross matter, essentially. Dwapara Yuga, space is annihilated, where we can travel to the other side of the globe very easily, and it's only going to increase in ease. Not time travel, but space travel is a part of Dwapara Yuga, which has already started but will increase. It's an age where the known phenomena of extraterrestrials won't be so weird or alien, but will be more commonplace. It's a period where the delusion of space is annihilated. And just as each age progresses, every aspect of man is vibrating at a more refined frequency. So, education, politics, spirituality, intelligence, technology, they're all getting more refined as we move into higher ages. And so Dwapara represents this. The bull of Dharma is only two-fourths developed. And so it's still a low age, but there's two legs to stand on now instead of one. It's the most dangerous age, which is kind of interesting. Because it's a low age, but because there's much more technological capability, there's a greater increase for war. There's a greater increase for destruction, just as we have the capability to wipe out the entire planet with nuclear and atomic warfare. It's a very turbulent time, and I'm going to touch into Dwapara Yuga more later on in this presentation because it's important. Um, but there's a lot of Kali Yugic remnants of the attitudes towards life, but with higher technological capability. And so it's kind of like giving the car keys to a hormonally raged 17-year-old, and you give them the keys to a $150,000 car with a $100,000 credit card, and you just go say, have fun for a couple weeks. They're gonna probably live and learn and maybe have a lot of mistakes. That's kind of the general idea of early Dwapara rising as we are in. It's a period emphasizing self-interest. It's a time of the self, whereas Kali Yuga institutions reign supreme. If you wanted to be spiritual, you had to completely obey to the church. You had to completely obey to the authority. Now we have much more of an emphasis on people's individuality. So we have social media, look at me kind of thing, which isn't a bad thing. It's just more um, emphasizing the self on all levels. To take an example, astrology, natal, horoscopic astrology, and Kali Yuga is much more emphasized on natural astrology, is predicting weather, predicting for the church, for the powers that be, whatever. Now, astrology is much more emphasized on the individual. So we have personal natal horoscopes being read. It's much less mundane astrology or astrology of the world. There's nobody I know that predicts weather with astrology. That's kind of a snapshot of Kali Yuga versus Dwapara Yuga. And like I said, space is annihilated. Um, so it's the delusion of space is getting less and less of a concrete barrier, you could say. And as this diagram suggests, the present day is we're just in the beginning of Dwapara Yuga. We still have about 2,000 years or more left of Dwapara arising. So we're not even fully in it. We still have Kali Yuga remnants through um, that are still kind of being expressed. These things are not black and white. It's not an on and off switch. It's a gradual phenomenon that's happening. So trade to Yuga, it's even longer. This is the beginning of the higher ages. Treta Yuga is the age of magnetism. It's the age of the mind, where mental capabilities are reaching a greater peak. The concept of time is annihilated. This is an age where the delusion of time, because space and time are inherently delusions according to spiritual philosophy. Um, this is where time travel, as we can't really conceive it to be, would be more prevalent. The Bull of Dharma is three-fourths developed. This is where humanity's really getting into its mojo. This is where the halfway point of the Yugas is met. It's the age of magnetism. It's the age of understanding magnetic relationship, much more than we have now. Um, Written language wouldn't really be a phenomenon in this age. That's more Dwapara. It's less physical, is what happens as we rise in these ages. Astrology as a science of time would be fully manifested in the Treta Yuga. Uh, so it's it's still the material plane in these higher ages, but they represent greater and greater refinement of the vibrational manifestation of man on Earth in general. And it's an age of thought and telepathy. It's the power of the mind. It's where we really use our minds in its much higher capacity. Satya Yuga, it's the golden age. It's the golden age of spirituality. It's the higher ages. It's as close as heaven on earth can be on this material plane. Atlantis was a Satya Yuga age, Satya Yuga civilization. The material and astral planes are much closer in alignment. It's an age of consciousness. It's an age of self-realization. It's an age of harmony. It's an age of an attunement to nature, a harmony with the divine plan, a harmony with the will of the divine. It's inconceivable in a lot of ways because we're in such a low age, but it's it's an age of truth. Satya literally means truth. It's an age of attunement to the divine, essentially. And so it's kind of nice that 9,600 years in total out of the 24,000 year cycle of the yugas, it's, the majority of the times in Satya Yuga, which is kind of nice. But we are not in that now. We're in the Dwapara Yuga. And so it's a very turbulent time. It's a rising age, so we have that going for us in general, but it's a turbulent time. And I don't need to go into details as to why our world is so intense with an overpopulated world and a complete lack of harmony with nature, a pillaging of nature and natural resources, a an addictive culture to technology and dopamine infused social media, et cetera, and everything. Um, but it is a rising age. And so it's kind of like the teenager, symbolically speaking, going through puberty and kind of learning itself a little bit. This is kind of humanity in general right now. We're in a very low age, but a rising age. The kind of the teenage phase of collective humanity. The transition between Yuga cycles, especially in Dwapara Yuga, are very turbulent, and we're still technically we're not in the exact transitionary phase, but there's still Kali Yugic remnants happening. There's kind of a tug of war in consciousness that's happening. And so Kali Yuga is very form fitted. It's very form affirming. It's very less expansive, whereas Dwapara is like a global neighborhood. It's a global cultural neighborhood of many people coming together and cultural cross-fertilization, you could say. Um, it's just like you go into a major city like San Francisco and there's like 50 different cultures happening. That's Dwapara Yuga. It's not Kali Yugic Rome, 500 AD, where you have slaves everywhere and women are suppressed and there's much more racism and that kind of thing. Dwapara, that's getting much more dissolved. There's more of an openness to humanity for women's rights, for that kind of realm. There's much less slavery today. If there is slavery, it's in countries you wouldn't want to visit or it's hidden away. Um, but Dwapara Yuga is a very dangerous age, and these Yuga cycles mirror each other, but not in a concrete way, but they do energetically and vibrationally. So Dwapara Yuga descending, we had what's called the Bronze Age collapse. That was from about oh, 1200 BC to 700 BC. That mirrors the time frame we are in now. They're both very turbulent times, and I'm going to go into this. So the Bronze Age collapse, or the Dwapara Yuga age collapse, you could say, um, was a time basically when every world civilization went through major disruption, dislocation, and often violent destruction. It was a period of general worldwide war. The Hittite, the Kassites, the Mycenaean, the Phrygian, Olmec, Norte-Chico. The Olmec and Norte-Chico were cultures from Mesoamerica. The Syrians, the Ugarit, many other cultures, they were all destroyed essentially. New Kingdom Egypt fell to be controlled by other cultures for the coming centuries, basically for the next 3,000 years. Basically, Egypt was in control of other cultures. China and India became greatly fragmented. You weren't really taught about this in school, at least I wasn't, but it was a time of just general gradual chaos, disruption, and dissolution. Nowhere was spared during this time. It was basically this long transitionary phase from the Bronze Age to the Iron Ages. It was this long transitionary phase from Dwapara, the age of magic, of like ancient Egypt and magic, which is very Dwaparian, to the Iron Ages. And it was just this big transitionary phase. Um, and so the book I'll refer to in the end of this talk goes into great more detail regarding the Bronze Age collapse, but it's very fascinating because we're in the middle of this mirroring effect. Um, the Bronze Age collapse would mirror 1700 AD to 2200 AD, which is we're in the smack middle of that. And so we have a technological abuse happening. We have a climate crisis, an abuse of nature, general turbulent time, overpopulation. Both the Bronze Age collapse time period and the period we are in is very war centered and with huge transformations of how we define borders, countries, and mapping and that kind of thing. We live in a very uncertain world where we've even had threats of global catastrophe through various means, especially warfare means. Um, the time we are in, especially because we live in such an intense populated world with the technologies, we will go through more, uh, how should I say it, intense transformations. Maybe that's the most positive way to put it. In the in the coming years, I'll just say that. But it's necessary. It's like the necessary growing pains for the real Dwapara Yuga to fully blossom, you could say. The positive about our times versus the descending Bronze Age collapse was in the descending Bronze Age collapse, things are just getting worse. Technologies are getting worse. It's like now it'd be like your car not really turning on or something like that. It's just everything's just degrading. Whereas now, even though it's such an intense time and there's going to be more intense things to happen, warfare, disease, etc., climate issues, and all of that, it's really, it shows growth in the end rather than destruction. So it shows more of a raising of consciousness in the end, on all levels rather than just a dissolution. So that's our positive for this time. But that's just we live in a dual phenomenal world. And so there's a descending time and there's an ascending time. We just happen to be in the ascending time. So astrology in the Dwapara Yuga, I'm transitioning into this part of the talk. Gets more into horoscopic astrology. So astrology in the Dwapara Yuga has much more to do with individuality in the self and self-expression. Whereas in Kali Yuga, it was much more about, mundane astrology. It was much more about predicting for the king, for the empire, that kind of thing. Kali Yuga astrology was superstitious. Um, Kali Yuga astrology was very fatalistic. Dwapara-based astrology is less fatalistic. It's more about the energy of the chart, how you can change. It's a malleable, energetic, fluidic blueprint. Um, the science of astrology is more refined. It's more accurate. It's more exacting. Just as all sciences have been gradually becoming more refined, so has astrology. Um, and of course, the technologies assisting astrology are much more refined. We have softwares that really help us. Now, on the one hand, softwares can make us less capable of actually hand drawing a chart and calculating a chart by hand, but the capability now and the ease is so much easier in Dwapara Yuga, just because technology assists with an easier life. Um, Kali Yuga astrology, for instance, in Rome, is a highlight in my Yugas and Zodiac debate ebook. And at the lowest nadir point of Kali Yuga, you were killed if you did astrology. Astrology was drawn out of the cities, like in Rome. During the Inquisition, astrologers were killed at times. It was the church had a lot against astrology, and rightfully so. It was just a lower time, so astrologers were more um, scrutinized in that regard. So now astrology is considered less fatalistic. It's more how you can change, basically. Because as human beings on Earth, we're essentially spiritual beings on a human journey. The goal here is to evolve spiritually in one form or another, whatever that manifests as. And so astrology gives a clarifying blueprint to get clarity on. That's kind of its highest octave. And so Sri Yukteswar had an interesting definition of astrology. Normally we'd think of astrology, oh, it's the how the stars and planets affect us on Earth or something like that, which is not untrue. There's a magnetic relationship happening out there affecting us here. But he had a very interesting quote. Astrology is the study of man's response to planetary stimuli. And the key word here is response, meaning we can respond to our karmic situation to change. Astrology is not meant to emphasize fate, but to arouse man's will to escape from his universal thraldom. Again, it's highlighting this spiritualization of we're here on Earth to evolve, essentially, not to be fatalistic with what our chart says and be just a slave to it. The stars offer a lawful channel for the outward operation of cause-effect equilibriums, which each man has set into motion in the past. So this is just some various quotes here from Sri Yukteswar. Superstitious awe of astrology makes one an automaton, slavishly dependent on mechanical guidance. That's a Kali Yugic attitude towards astrology. The wise man defeats his planets, which is to say his past, by transferring his allegiance from the creation to the creator, meaning the person who's trying to become more knowledgeable about himself is attuning his nature, his intuitive connection with the divine, and naturally the astrology gets more refined. It's not a fatalistic emphasis here. The more he realizes his unity with spirit, the less he can be dominated by matter. The soul is ever free. It is deathless because birthless. It cannot be regimented by stars. So these quotes are kind of really breaking, especially in Indian astrology, where it has a tendency to be very fatalistic. It's really breaking this fatalistic aspect of like, oh, my karma to, oh, this is my karma and I can change my karma. I can make my karmic situation better. I can undo what I've done. I can make my life better. And here's Yogananda. Yogananda had an interesting attitude towards astrology. He actually would seek out astrologers to try to find his most difficult periods, and he would still accomplish what he would want to do. He was a man of a lot of willpower, and again, he really wanted to emphasize this aspect of, not a fatalistic attitude towards karma, not a fatalistic attitude towards astrology. They really wanted to just bash that to the ground, and so they're bringing more of this evolutionary astrology, as it's called in the West. The starry inscription at one's birth, I came to understand, is not that man is a puppet of his past. Its message is rather a prod to pride, the very heavens to seek or arouse man's determination to be free from every limitation. Man's freedom is final and immediate if he so wills. It depends not on outer but inner victories. What I have found with doing readings from studying astrology is that the change astrologically that we can make is not so much in you're born to be poor and you have that and combinations in your chart to be impoverished and all of a sudden you become a billionaire. No, I don't see that. I see an inner attitude shift within your being. That's what I see. I see changes in the mind, in the consciousness, which can affect the outer as well. It's getting the refinement of the planets, the houses, the signs, etc., to express themselves in a more higher octave. And here's some more quotes, basically saying the more spiritually you are attuned to God, to your higher nature, to right company, etc., the more harmonized you are in yourself, less you can be affected negatively by astrology and vice versa. As he said here, if your body and mind are weak through the transgressions of wrong eating, thinking, poor character, and bad company, the stellar rays will have the power to affect you. Just in general. In other words, the less harmonized you are, the more you can be at the mercy of your karma. So, yogic astrology, it's the inner astrology. Um, as we see this Tibetan rendition of a yogi with the chakras, um, that kind of shows the inner anatomy of astrology. In fact, it's the true astrology, really, because in spiritual thought, our reality, how the universe is a projection from our consciousness. And it's using astrology to move forward spiritually. That's its basis. It's using astrology to gain clarity on our lives, to to live the fulfilling lives that we can live, and to help us evolve. That's basically it. Astrology is a karmic constitutional blueprint, not a fixed reality. Like I've said in the past here, it's energetic, it's fluidic, it's malleable. A chart is not a static blueprint. The inner anatomy of the chakras or energy centers of the body, that shows the chakras of the body. The planets rule these chakras. And if you wanted to study the chakras more in depth, you just study the planets corresponding to that chakra. So you study Mercury, the throat chakra, Venus, the heart, Mars, the navel center, Jupiter, the sex center. We have Saturn at the base. And sun and moon represent the spiritual eye, with the sun being the spiritual third eye, and the moon being the medulla at the base of the spiritual eye, which connects. That's just a snapshot there. And the rulership of the signs that the planets represent correspond to the chakras as well. Um, Astrology is a spiritual counseling tool. That's probably its highest octave. It's just who cares what you have or don't have? That's not what's truly important. It's we're here to live our purpose, whatever that may be. That's not necessarily meditating and following a guru. Living our purpose could be being involved very avid in the world, and but that's what's good for your growth. And so astrology can give us clarity on these things. And so yogic astrology or yogic psychology, I use yogic psychological principles with astrology. I use the gunas primarily. You can use the five elements: ether, air, fire, water, earth. The chakras, some people like to use those. I don't use the chakras so much in my practice, just I find it impractical most of the time. I like the gunas as a framework. You can use the caste system, which is a system of degrees of consciousness. It's not a physical life sentence thing that people just judge. Um, Ultimately, we're trying to tap into Brahman consciousness if we're trying to evolve. I like to use the yamas and niyamas of yogic philosophy because they give the basis for right living on all levels, and they are the basis for living happily. And so the yamas are ruled by Saturn. They are the don'ts, they are the restraints, non-harmfulness, non-deceit or truthfulness, non-covetousness, continence, non-attachment. The niyamas, which are the more expansive qualities, they deal with Jupiterian qualities. Niyamas are ruled by Jupiter. Purity, contentment, austerity, not forced austerity, but natural austerity, self-study or self-introspection, openness to higher truths or a devotional attunement to the divine. These give a fundamental basis for spiritual people, but it's also just a fundamental basis if you want to be happy, basically. And so it gives a basis to work on a psychological level through astrology. In other words, I use these principles when doing counseling-based astrology. So the gunas, this is the meat and potatoes of yogic astrology that I use. This is how I do it. The gunas are primordial forces or qualities of nature. They literally mean what binds because they deal with the creational aspect of binding us to creation. Basically, they pervade everything. And I use them psychologically in this context. So the three gunas are sattva, rajas, tamas. Sometimes they're called sattva guna, guna, tamo guna. Um, and there are these three pillars of how further or close we are to divine refinement, you could say. But they're an ex law of three of how creation expresses itself. So psychologically, sattva is light, it's purity, it's clarifying, it's harmonious, it's elevating, it's refinement, it's spiritualizing, it's virtuous. This is sattva guna. Uh, Rajas guna, which relates to the period we are in of Dwapara Yuga and the general world we live in, which is a very Rajasic world. It's very ego active is a very key term with this. Busyness is stimulating. It's very restless. Rajaguna, it's the restless mind. It's turbulent. It's outward in its nature. It can be unfocused. It's agitating. This is general snapshot description of our world. We live in a Rajasic world. Uh, these are not judgment terms, sattva, rajas, tamas. They give a framework of how consciousness is being expressed. Tamasic or tamas, it's dullness, inertia, it's downward, it's heaviness, it's degradation, it's ignorant, delusive, darkens, it's obstructing. This is psychologically speaking, you could think of the drug addict in a stupor. That's a tamasic psychological state. That's like Saturn, Rahu in astrology manifesting in a very negative light, you could say. So these gunas are applicable to astrology. You can use these with the houses. Like let's take the eighth house. Lowest eighth house is like base violence that a human can do. That's just, you know, inhumane violence. That's rape, murder, that kind of thing. That's like Mars, Saturn, Ra. That's just like the malefics functioning as lowest level in the eighth house. Higher eighth house or medium eighth house is like the grinding struggle of the addict to improve their life. Like they see they're in a tamasic state with their addiction, but they're actively applying rajas and stimulation of various kinds to get them out of their tamasic state. So maybe they don't always do it. Maybe the rajas goes to sattva a little bit. Maybe the rajas goes to tamas a little bit. But the rajasic eighth house is, maybe they're clean for a little bit and then they indulge in X, Y, or Z drug or something like that. And Raja Sattva is the movement towards greater harmony within oneself. It's being aware of your psychological flaws and trying to find a wisdom about those flaws. Raja Sattva is like seeing a therapist or a psychologist that's getting you aware of your internal issues of the eighth house, that the eighth house is symbolically representing, and getting that more refined. Sattva eighth house is like the spiritual, the metaphysical practitioner that's transformed themselves. And they're just in their mojo spiritually. They're in their harmonious nature. They don't even have to be a yogi or something. It's just somebody that's gone through their internal battles and they've come out on the other side and they're living their truth. They're living in greater purity. They're living in greater virtuousness. And these gunas combine. Sattva Rajas is like a combination. Rajas Tamas. Most people are in this middle ground. A saint is sattva at its highest form. A criminal is in tamas. Most people are in between, and that's okay. It just gives a framework to work from a yogic psychological perspective, and this can be applied to astrology. And so let's have some fun here. Mercury can be used its intelligence in a deceiving way. That'd be tamasic Mercury. We're using, like a criminal using their Mercury to gain, but they're using their intelligence in a very degrading kind of manner. Mercury can be the restless mind. It's very mental in that regard. That's more Rajasic. Sattvic Mercury is discrimination in a very pure way. It's trying to tune into what's real from unreal and finding a impersonal truth in that regard. Saturn. Saturn can be quiet, which can be very sattvic in that regard, like a quiet person that's just kind of in tune with nature or something. They don't need to speak, they're just at peace. But quietness can be like the contracting shyness of Saturn. That's more tamasic quietness. That's tamasic Saturn. Rajasic Saturn's kind of the hard worker in that regard. And so those are kind of some examples. You could take Venus. Everybody loves Venus. Venus is the planet of enjoyment. But when that enjoyment, that Rajasic enjoyment becomes too much, you would turn into tamas and dullness and inertia where you're just like, oh, the night was fantastic, and oh, the morning after kind of effect. That's Venus. Um, Venus is a total attachment to sense pleasures. That would be tamasic Venus. Sattvic Venus is kind-heartedness. It's loving for the sake of love. And a love of nature, a love of animals. That's Venus. It's an understanding of how to work in a healthy way, because Venus is a Brahmin planet in Vedic astrology. It's understanding how to work in the world in a healthy way. Like, okay, we can enjoy life too, which is great, but we can't enjoy it, not let us enjoy us, kind of thing. And so these gunas have an upward trend, but they can go down. And just as we can evolve upward, we can devolve downward. And so they give us a framework in this regard to work with. And like I said, most people, humanity, are in the Rajasic or framework here. And the goal of yogic astrology is to move upward because the goal of yogic astrology or evolutionary astrology, if you want to call that like they do in the West, is to evolve. That's what we're here for spiritually. It's not a fatalistic thing. We're here to evolve. And that could manifest in a myriad of ways. It's not just some, you don't have to become a renunciate to do this. You can have a family life and do all of that. It's whatever's your purpose in that regard. And so Yogananda has a quote, by communing regularly with God in meditation, all planetary forces will automatically begin to harmonize with you. Remember the planets, the signs, they relate to the inner anatomy. The more you commune with God, the more harmonious they will become, meaning the planets are referred to as stars because they look like stars in the sky. This is the true meaning of spiritualizing your astrology. And so this is my website, scottmarcom.com. I have a Substack where I have my short ebook. It's a 6 chapter ebook called Astrology, the Yugas and the Zodiac Debate, where I explore the sidereal and tropical zodiacs from the framework of the Yugas. I also have some other articles on Substack. Um, and I offer various readings on my website, a variety of astrological services. And some of the quotes from the autobiography of a yogi, fantastic book, and the fantastic book on the yugas, the keys to understanding our hidden past, emerging energy age, and enlightened future by Joseph Selby and David Steinmetz. That goes into great detail about the equinoctial based yuga cycle, and it's very, very compelling. So it's a fun read. So um, that's that's my that's my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you.